y'all. Buzz, the biker here at Baxter Cycle in the mighty metropolis of Marnie, Iowa. We are in one of the vintage shops today. And what I want to show you is this little hot rod engine. It's a Norton 750 engine. Came out of an Atlas, 1967 Atlas, I think. And it's got kind of a tail to it. Guy went down to the Norton dealer and he bought himself an Atlas. And he didn't want the engine. He wanted everything but the engine. He was going to put a Vincent engine in the bike. And so he took this out and rode and somehow or another managed to seize it up. Took the engine out of the bike, threw it in the corner, and went ahead and did his thing with the Vincent engine. So years go by, and I don't know how it ended up, but Randy Baxter bought it, and he said he's had it at least 25 years, and they finally sold it, I guess. But the engine was seized up. They took it apart, and what they found is the engine had been overheated, and the pistons had seized in the cylinder bores right there. So they rebored them and new pistons and all that stuff, and ready to go. That's kind of a tale in itself, isn't it? I've always found these, these British motorcycles, Triumph over yonder. I think that's a BSA right there. We've got an Ariel right here. I've always, Royal Enfield right there. Isn't that neat? Always found them interesting. They've got some unique characteristics. They're light, they're powerful. They, usually are twin cylinders. I think all of them in here are twin cylinders except for maybe that one right there. There's an 850 Commando over yonder. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Kind of a beautiful, work of art, kind of thing to me. Light pieces put together. I think a little heavier than a Triumph engine, but not much. Still built with the same theory, lots of little tiny pieces that are light, that are fit together very well to get the strength of the product. And so parallel twin, air-cooled. I don't have the head here. I wish I could show you that, but we'll talk about that. It's a pushrod engine. There's a camshaft that runs right through the front. Now, a Triumph will have a camshaft on the front and the back. And if you look at this, you'll see that, a Triumph has a heart here with a cam here and a cam here. This has a camshaft here. And then that cam runs all the way across the front. And we'll talk about the pushrods here in a second. Now on this side, this actually runs the magneto on this side. So that is actually a magneto. Back in the day, they had a magneto. There's an oil pump down here. Now this is a dry sump engine, so my thoughts were that this was would have two oil pumps, just like a Harley does or something like that. My old Sportster has two, a scavenge pump and a pressure pump. Well, this only has one oil pump, and that runs as a scavenge pump and as a pressure pump. So that I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. Usually you have a scavenge pump. The scavenge pump is the one that takes the oil out of the bottom of the engine and runs it up to the top, into the tank, the oil tank. And let me see if I can find you a bike with something like that. So here's an oil tank. If there's the sump down here, that's where the oil would collect, and the scavenge pump would pump that oil back up to the tank. And generally you wanted that to be a higher volume pump than your pressure pump, because you wanted to get as much of that extra, you wanted it to pump more oil out of the engine than you were pumping in, and in this case it's a singular pump, which I thought was interesting. And by the way, this is how you tell, I think this is how you tell, I don't know if that's right. It used to be there, some of these bikes, there's a little thing here that when the bike is running, oil pressure will push out this little doodad so you know you've got oil pressure. But this has a singular pump anyway. So singular pump takes the oil out of the bottom, runs it up to the tank. From the tank, it drops back down to the pump, pressurizes the system, and that runs the oil to all the critical places, to the cams, to the top end, everywhere it needs to go. I think when the oil gets to the top end, I don't have a cylinder head here to show you, but when it gets to the cylinder head, there's little oil lines and external oil lines. When they get there, the oil comes in, lubes up the rocker arms and valves and all that neat stuff, and I believe it falls back through these push rod tubes, because I don't see any other ways for it to. And then, that might be an oil galley right there. And then that lubes the cam up, and then it falls back down to the bottom of the engine. So that's how that system works. While we're talking about the cam, this is a mechanical tack drive right here. Very interesting. So the cam, let's focus on that. So the cam here runs push rods, and on this engine, the push rods are inside the head. So if we look at something like this Triumph over here, the push rods for this bike are in this tube here. And when you assemble this, you put this all together separately, and there's gasket here and a gasket up here, and Everything has to be just right, and these are all places that it can leak. Now on the Norton, it doesn't have that because they're all internal. The cost of that is that these push rods are, when you go to build this engine, when you go to put the head on, you have to have like a third hand. I've never done it. I was talking to the mechanic Justin about this the other day. He says it takes really like 3 hands to get the head on and get everything lined up right so that everything works right. He says on the Atlas it isn't so bad, but on the Norton, or on the Commando, I'm sorry, on the Commando the engine actually leans forward. See the angle here? It actually leans forward about 15 degrees. He said on that you don't have gravity helping you, it works against you, and so that creates a bit of a problem. Now while we're talking about the push rods, there's 2 tall ones and 2 short ones. And I think the tall ones are the center and the short ones are the sides. Now, how do they go in? I figured they would go in like this. I don't know why I thought that, but I did. Actually, they go in like this. So you've got this round point on the bottom that goes into a lifter block that runs on the cam. And then on top, you've got this recess. And the rocker arm fits into that recess right there. Kind of a neat system. So there they are. They're made out of aluminum. They want them as light as they can be. They got steel ends, you know, old spark plugs. These are the rocker arm covers right here. Not sure what that is. Maybe I just don't know. Anyway, a really neat system, you know. So less leaking because there's literally less places for it to leak. Everything's internal. One big solid chunk, you know, fewer parts, all that neat stuff. So I know this is a 750. One is because I was told it was a 750, but one of the other ways you tell if it's a 750, see these bolts right here? Now if we go back over here to the Norton engine and look underneath here, so we see the bolts back here, but we don't see them over here. This is all internalized now. And I think, yeah, right there, there's bolts, you bolt through the top of the cylinder all the way down. And that's how that works. It's a stronger system, a little more meat there. Isn't that a beautiful motor? Absolutely gorgeous. Now back here at this engine, you can see how these are open. Isn't that just a beautiful thing? To me, this is like artwork, you know, very beautiful, absolutely amazing machine. So this bike still has a magneto, but it has a stator. Stator, you know, there's a generator and there's a stator. A generator makes X amount of power per revolution. Stator makes 3 times X, so X times 3. So whatever a generator puts out, stator puts out 3. If you've ever owned a motorcycle with a generator and has a generator light, sometimes when it's at idle, you'll see the light. When the light comes on when it's below a certain voltage, you'll see that light flickering at you and you'll give it a little gas, you know, and it'll go. Also, some of these old bikes have amp meters. Apparently none of the ones that are here. And the amp meter will have a discharge and a charge. And to the left, if it's to the left, that means you're producing less voltage than you're using. If it's to the right, you're producing more, or amperage or voltage, wattage. How's that? Anyway, so this bike already has a modern. Hey, it says Lucas right there. You know, all stator. It's got, but it still has a cam drive. One thing I always talk about are the primary change. You know, we hear that a lot: the primary drive and the secondary drive, or the primary drive and the back wheel drive. So the primary drive means, so off the end of the crankshaft. This is a 3-part crankshaft, by the way. Off the end of the crankshaft, there's a big old sprocket, and that sprocket has this chain. So all the power from the engine comes out of that sprocket, goes through this chain, which wraps around what's called a clutch basket right there. And all that power goes through that clutch basket. When you use the clutch, you loosen or tighten this pack of fiber and metal discs together, or part, and that allows power to go through here to the transmission. And let's see if I can scoot this again. There's the transmission. In here, the transmission, you know, that's where your 4 gear ratios. This is a 4-speed transmission. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a little indicator right there. The shifter here, the kickstarter there. Now, and then the drive for the rear wheel, the final drive, that actually is a chain right through here. There's another sprocket right under here. I don't know if you can see it back there, but it's there. And that's what gets the power to the rear. So the primary chain is right here. The final drive, that's the one that goes to the back tire, runs out the back. Other things about these engines that I might throw in, I talked about the angle. So the angle of the Commando engines is 15 degrees forward. Now, why is that? I always thought they did it just because it looked neat, you know, like a style statement. And it was actually part of the suspension, the rubber suspension that holds the engine. So this engine and transmission, even the mufflers, are all on rubber mounts. Iso-elastic, iso something like that. And yeah, you can see it right there. Big old rubber mounts on the front. Here it is on the muffler. I don't know if I can see it for the transmission or not, but it's back there somewhere. And in order to get that to work, they had to lean the engine forward that 15 degrees. And they only had to lean the engine forward, the whole thing. Case and everything got leaned forward. All of this is the same, you know, because the transmission's separate. The primary and everything still runs flat, you know, and the engine itself was the only thing that got moved forward. That's a beautiful bike, isn't it? Oh, chrome frame. Look at that. Another thing I was going to talk about was points. Now this has a magneto, so the points are going to be in the magneto. Let's run back over here to the Norton. The points on something like this does not have a magneto, but the points are actually in here. So you take this off, the points are for the ignition. There's a coil, makes a field of energy. The points, when they open, the field collapses, and that creates a voltage spike that creates the spark to your spark plug. Anyway, those points are generally in there, and I would guess it has 2 sets of points, 1 for each cylinder. There's the piston, flat top. Isn't that neat? Just beautiful. Look at all this. Just all this work right there. Absolutely gorgeous. Spinning this around again. Look at that. Isn't that just neat? Kickstarter right there. This one was a Kickstarter only, of course. That one over yonder is a Kickstarter only. I think the electric starts, I think they started in 75, so quite a bit later. Very nice looking. Let's take a walk down to the other shop. All right, we made our way back here into the vintage cycle area. All right, so the starter does not hook onto this at all. It actually hooks back onto the other side. Let's see if we can get a look at that. This is a Norton Commando, by the way. See, now there's a big bump up there. That's the starter engine right there. I'm told the starters on these were pretty weak, so you kind of get the bike on just over dead center with your Kickstarter, and then you'd hit the electric start to get it to start. Quick addendum to the video. We were talking about electric starters. This is a Norton 850. You can tell again, we talked about the detailing. If you notice here, this has got a 4-row chain, where the 750 motor only had a 1-row chain. This has got a diaphragm clutch, I believe that's what that's called. A different kind of an alternator. And then if you look here, so there's a starter here, right back here. This is an aftermarket Alton starter. Runs down here to a gear drive that runs into the engine case. And then this whole thing here is a kit. So that turns a chain that must run on the sprocket that runs to the engine. And you know, look at how much beefier this engine is compared to the other one. Diaphragm clutch, actually it's a 3-row chain. Now, I like that. I like that a lot. You know, pretty nifty system for its time. I think we have an Atlas back here somewhere. If I can find it. Boy, they got everything else, don't they? Oh, here it is right here. Norton Atlas, 1967. So it'd be the same as what we were just looking at. You can see the mechanical tack drive right there. Coming over here, there's the primary cover. I think that's actually a tin primary cover. It's made out of tin. Notice there's no screws around the perimeter of the primary cover. It's all centrally, you know, held in place by the center bolt, right there where the foot peg is. Carburetor's up here. There's a picture of the head, a view of the head. Just a gorgeous looking engine, isn't it? I think that tube right there is a engine vent at the end of the camshaft. These are absolutely wonderful motorcycles. I got to ride a couple of these over the years, and Randy Baxter said when you ride it, don't be gentle. They don't like to run slow. So I took it and I was gentle because, you know, it was an old motorcycle. And it was, you know, it ran, it did okay, but it wasn't great. So I decided to open her up and see what he was talking about. And boy, just a whole different beast when you ride it right. And it really runs good, really runs good. Anyway, I think these motors were supposed to put out between 50 and 60 horsepower. Just loads of fun, loads of fun. Let's see, this is where that vent tube is right there. I like it a lot. One quick thing I'd like to add on, British motorcycles always have the split in the case, at least the ones I've seen, this way. And we always talk about leaking oil. If you look on this table, you'll probably see oil. Well, there's, yeah, right there. And that's because these, you know, they always leak. The cases come together, you match them up really good. There's a good seal in there, but over time, you know, the vibrations are so minute, they weaken the seal, and it eventually almost always leak. If you look underneath any of these British bikes, it's the same thing. Maybe I'm wrong, but generally they. The one time I want to point it out, and there's no, well, here's some oil over here. If you go into the vintage bike area, you'll see a lot of this. We put what we call diapers underneath them to absorb the oil. These are actually really good. Oh, there's one with a little bit of oil underneath. That's a BSA. This is a really cool Triumph here. It says 1962. Let's take a good look at that. Again, mechanical drive here for the tachometer. I was pointing out, this is the external push rods, the tubes anyway. One cam here runs the exhaust valves. Another cam here on the other side runs, another cam over here runs the intake valves. There's the push rods for that right through there. 2 carburetors on this one. I believe this bike has 2 carburetors. I know it has 2 carburetors, and I think they're sitting in here. Yeah, they're monoblocks right there. Isn't that nifty? All right, my friends. Now, if y'all are interested in a new or used Royal Enfield, Triumph, classic British bike of any type, need parts, accessories, thingamajigs, doodads, gear, helmets, jackets, gloves, boots, socks and underwear, anything at all, get yourself over here to Baxter Cycle in the mighty metropolis of Marnie, Iowa, or go to baxtercycle.com. Make sure you tell those fine folks that Fuzzy Biker, that's me, sent you. Hit like and subscribe. Now, it's a cold day here, but if it's a nice day where y'all are at, get out and ride. Wahoo!
Wahoo! Ready? 1, 2, 3. Wahoo!